Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and I'm going to be finishing off the remainder of this month with some Rotted requests and getting those out from under my belt. And this one comes from Twan Strong, who gave me the option of either watching and reviewing the 2017 Spanish film Veronica or the 2022 film from Indonesia, Ivanna. I had already seen Veronica, albeit it had been a little while, so I mean, I probably could do with a refresher, but even so, I kind of wanted to put my focus on the one that I had not yet seen, and I do love me some good Indonesian horror films, so I was pretty jazzed about firing those one up. And another reason that I was excited about Ivana is not just being Indonesian horror, but also directed by Kimo Stambo, who directed one of my favorite Indonesian horror films of all time, Macabre, who had the iconic villainess of Dara, who still holds a place in my heart as one of the best villainesses ever put to screen. Not to mention that the gore factor in Macabre was awesome, so I was pretty pumped to see what he could put out next. And apparently this movie is part of the Danur universe, which is comprised of several films, including Danur and Danur 2. But from what I could tell, this one was fairly standalone in its plot and its characters and its storyline and so on. So even though it's part of this universe, those don't seem like they were necessarily prerequisites. So yeah, happy to give this one a try. Based on a best-selling novel, and it's honestly just out of pure recognizing and respecting that I will probably fuck up the pronunciation horribly, that I'm not even going to try, but suffice it to say, based on a best-selling novel, this follows the brother and sister character of Ambar and Dika as they have lost their parents and move into a nursing home owned by a family friend. And it's kind of a small out of the countryside establishment that is it's just a very intimate kind of care facility for some elderly folks. So, you know, moving in there and helping out is not necessarily that out of line. And once they get there and they get established through a series of happenstances, they happen to come across an area that had been boarded up previously, a basement that nobody knew was there. And in there, they find a statue of a headless woman sitting in a chair. And after that, things start going awry in some pretty traditional supernatural fashion. So Twan, when he recommended this movie to me, he said, this was a creepy Indonesian horror film that did a nice job being suspenseful. I don't watch too many subtitled horror movies, but the ones I have chosen over the years were decent. Your thoughts on this entry? My thoughts on this entry was decent is probably about the best word that I can come up with. I thought this was a fairly middle of the road horror film that did a decent job with some decent characters and decently pulled off some interesting moments. But I think that's about as generous as I can go with this one. And I think that I was preparing myself and hoping for a whole lot more. I think I could actually, you know, just kind of go over that entire statement that I just made and replace the word decent with generic, not in a bad way. I want to make sure that that's clear. A lot of the moments in this were generic. The characters were generic. They felt very generic. There wasn't really a whole lot of depth to them. They were going through the paces of a very generic haunting storyline and having very generic kind of kills and sequences and so forth happen as a result of that. Again, all generic, but all decent. No real complaints here, but I do have a rant or two, because when I go into a movie and I am expecting it to be bad, or at the very least, you know, just kind of watching the first 5 minutes of it, it's setting it up so that it is a bad movie, you know, clearly bad movie, Amityville Island, things like that. Any of your typical Mark Poloni affair. Sometimes it can be fun. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a hoot, but you know, for the most part, you kind of expect bad. And that's all right. I enjoy watching bad movies. I advocate for watching bad movies. It's a slogan. It's literally a t-shirt that I sell. Watch more bad movies. But there's something a little bit deflating when I know that a director can pull off more, and the best that they really put to screen is something that's good. And it kind of took me a little while to figure out what it was about Ivana that just wasn't landing home with a sledgehammer like previous works like Macabre did. There was one scene in particular that I couldn't get out of my head, and I'll show it to you here, because I think it really finely illustrates exactly what I'm talking about in terms of competent and good, but still missing the mark. So I have one question for you. Who was this scene for? I couldn't figure it out. It was kind of wedged in. It was probably like in the first, 30 minutes of the film. It was right about the time that things started to get revealed and start getting to ramping up a little bit and introducing some of the actual scare elements of the film. But here's the thing. That character didn't see what happened behind her. And honestly, even if she had an inkling, one thing I hadn't really discussed is that her eyesight is very poor, so she's legally blind, but it doesn't matter. She wasn't even looking in the direction. The ghost or apparition or statue or whatever you want to call it stood up, went after her, and did nothing. Why? What, in any character level, was she going for? What, in any plot level, was she attempting to do? Was she trying to attack? Why didn't she? I mean, there was no real indication in this movie of any kind of like steady growth of power through the influence of family love or anything like a lot of movies will try to introduce to. It was simply, the portal had been opened or the basement had been opened and time for to get nuts. So who was that motion for? The only real answer that I have is the audience, us, watching the movie. And when I have a situation like that, it takes me out of the movie on a subconscious level when a scene is only doing service to me as the audience and it doesn't fulfill anything on a character level, on a plot level, on a progression level, on a conflict level, on an escalation level, and it just simply exists to fill me with the creepies. It takes me out of the movie. I tend to recognize that now it's fan service. Now it's like a 3D movie where glass is showing up at the screen or a character is doing this for no reason. And that's the kind of thing that even if it got me on a scare level, I would hate myself after it for that. I would feel like it was a cheap get. And I know that this director has enough talent and horror chops to get away with having a solid movie without resorting to cheap like that. And that's the kind of thing that was really brought throughout the entirety of the movie, was not necessarily bad scares, but fairly generic, fairly cheap, fairly, oh God, I'm really hesitating to say the word lazy. That feels a little harsh, but in the end, there was nothing about this movie that really resonated. And once again, if it was a bad movie and I was expecting bad stuff and I managed to have a little bit of fun in between the bad moments, that'd be great. But knowing that this is a great director that has put out great material and is relying on cheap scares to put out a good movie just felt a little deflating. So it's not that I don't recommend this movie. And I honestly do recommend it. I mean, it was a halfway decent movie, and some of the gore in it was pretty decent. It kind of, it wasn't as absurdly awesome as it was in Macabre, but there was some good gore moments in this. But overall, I found myself having to really kind of turn my brain off to enjoy it on the level that I wish I didn't have to do. I wish I could have remained thoughtful. I wish I could have analyzed things more. I wish I could have really latched onto the characters and their hopes and desires and dreams and difficulties and so forth. In the end, it just kind of became a horror movie and nothing more. And that's a little bit of a shame. So yeah, do I recommend Ivana? Sure. Why not? If you have a Friday night, you want to kick on something, it's available on Amazon Prime, at least in the US. So yeah, there's nothing stopping you. And I'm certainly not going to be the one trying to say no. It's a serviceable movie. Pity. But nevertheless, I am happy to get a watch like this under my belt and check off another movie on Letterboxd. If you want to follow me on Letterboxd, my account is in the description below. Go ahead and check it out there. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. If you want to support me further, a super thanks or a Patreon subscription would definitely not go amiss. We have watch parties, Discord benefits, and all sorts of good behind the scenes stuff starting at only $1 a month. It's a great little family of ours. We'd love for you to be a part of it. Thank you again. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.